The security guards at the military museum gripped Thomas Harlan's frail arms as they marched him toward the exit. His weathered face remained calm, even as one guard barked into his radio about a stolen Valor case. The old man had been caught wearing a Navy SEAL trident pin on his worn jacket, and someone had reported him. Thomas didn't resist. At 78, his body was tired, marked by decades of manual labor after leaving the service. Before we continue, I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments. His calloused hands, which once held weapons in the jungles of Vietnam, now trembled slightly from age. He'd simply wanted to visit the museum on Veterans Day, to remember friends who never came home. But the young guard insisted no real SEAL would look like him, dressed in thrift store clothes, driving a beat-up truck. The commotion drew a crowd. Tourists whispered and pointed. A teenage boy filming on his phone shouted about exposing a fake hero. Thomas closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of invisibility he'd carried for 50 years. Nobody saw him anymore. Nobody remembered. Then a voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Release that man immediately." Vice Admiral Catherine Morrison strode across the marble floor, her uniform crisp, her expression fierce. She'd been touring the museum for an official visit when she noticed the disturbance. As she approached, her eyes locked onto Thomas's left forearm, where his sleeve had rolled up during the struggle. There, faded but unmistakable, was a tattoo. Not the mass-produced tridents civilians bought online. This was something else entirely, a skull with crossed rifles. A date, 1971, and numbers that made her blood run cold. SD to 1, Alpha Platoon. The Admiral's hand went to her chest. "My God," she whispered. Thomas met her gaze and something passed between them, recognition. Not of faces, but of sacrifice. Of missions that stayed classified. Of brothers lost in operations that officially never happened. "Do you know who this is?" Morrison asked the guards, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "This man served in SEAL Team 1 during the darkest days of Vietnam. Alpha Platoon ran operations so dangerous, so classified that most of their missions are still redacted." She turned to Thomas, and her rigid military bearing softened. "Sir, I studied your unit at the Naval Academy. Alpha Platoon had one of the highest casualty rates in SEAL history. You were the tip of the spear when nobody else would go." Thomas's eyes glistened. For decades, he'd stayed silent. The missions were classified. His teammates died in jungles whose names appeared on no maps. He came home to nothing, struggled with nightmares, worked construction jobs because nobody would hire a veteran with gaps in his service record he could unexplain. Morrison snapped to attention and rendered a crisp salute. "I apologize, Senior Chief." On behalf of the United States Navy and a grateful nation, the museum fell silent. Then, one by one, other veterans in the crowd straightened and saluted. If this story is touching your heart, don't scroll past without hitting that like button. The teenage boy lowered his phone, shame coloring his face. The guard stepped back, heads bowed. Thomas returned the salute, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. For the first time in 50 years, someone saw him, really saw him. "Thank you, Admiral," he said quietly. "I just wanted to remember my friends," Morrison nodded, understanding everything he couldn't say. "They would be proud of you, Senior Chief. You never stopped serving, even when no one knew your name." Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we walk past every day, invisible until someone remembers to look. If this story reminded you to honor those who served in silence, to see the invisible warriors around us, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell us about a veteran in your life who deserves recognition. Let's make sure their sacrifices are never forgotten. Hit that subscribe button, not just for me, but for every Thomas Harlan out there who served when no one was watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you to all who served.